Well, everybody, welcome to Beers with Bill, edition 52. It's my pleasure to welcome back Keith Carman, our resident cellar expert, and to welcome David Hussey on the show tonight. He's been doing a lot of the background work. So, Keith, David, welcome to the last show of the first year.
Wild. Absolutely insane that we made it this far.
Yes, who would have thought? I mean, when we first talked, I said, what, 12 shows, maybe 20 tops?
So I'm sure we'll get into this in a little bit, but yeah, the entire genesis of this thing is so, what if we just tried something and here we are like a year later? So absolutely insane, honestly.
A year later and almost a full third booked into next year.
Yeah, it's nuts. So yeah, well, Bill, Keith, if you're all right, I'm going to dive right into some stuff. How's that sound?
It sounds fantastic.
All right, so before, I have lots of questions for you too, and I'm really excited for a bunch of these things. But before we get started, I think it was a year ago, maybe it was the first couple of shows for sure, but we did a cellar challenge for everyone. And so I know both of you have brought cellared beers to this. Do you want to talk about what you brought?
Keith?
Most definitely. Thank you. I'm super curious to hear about how many people have cellared beers, given the conversation we had on the first episode. I'm also curious to hear how many people are willing to open them today, which is, to me, is kind of an epic day. This is amazing. Like, we're celebrating like
a full year.
This, like, right on, Bill. Like, wow, 52 sessions of loving you. So, and you, David, for doing this. Like, thank you. What I decided to do was I brought out, well, go figure, I brought out a Bose beer. I brought out our Paper Chase, which is from 2019, and it's a Birchwood Ale. I thought this would be the perfect occasion to bring something out a couple years old, see what happens. I'm sitting super close to the sink because I have no idea what's going to happen when I open this. But I thought it'd be the perfect occasion to celebrate a beer I loved when it first came out, see how it staged over a couple of years, and do it on this, momentous occasion. That's where I'm standing. What do you say, Bill?
I think it's fantastic. I'm looking forward to the YouTube version of what happens when you pop that open. I stuck with, so I had sort of chosen 4, and I stuck with the one that I have opened most often, which is the Wellington Russian Imperial Stout.
Very nice.
Which I bought back in June, just before Marvin was on the show the first time.
Got one in the fridge right now.
And this will be the 4th time I've opened. So this will be the 4th can out of the 6 I bought that I've opened.
Very good.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's interesting because it hasn't changed that much.
No,
the sweetness is starting to dissipate, but I thought it would have dissipated much sooner.
Huh. Oh, you've already opened it. Wow. Okay.
I was smart enough so it wouldn't be a YouTube feature. Okay.
What about you, David? What are you going with?
Well, the funny thing is, Bill and I had chatted when we first chatted a couple of days ago about running over. I was going to run over to Woodstock, grab some beers from him, grab some cellar stuff. And then I got my pre-registration confirmed. And so I had to change all of my plans so I could fit that appointment in today. So I was unable to make it, but I've, one of the local breweries in town rebranded recently. And so I've been diving into their stuff a little bit, try to see what they can come up with. And so they did and I thought this was kind of cool considering the show, but I'm drinking New Beginnings from Stockyard, which used to be Red Circle. And especially like with my shot that just came in and like this occasion, I was like, this is a beer that really represents today. I'm okay with this. So it kind of worked out nicely. Yeah.
That's amazing. I didn't realize the Red Circle had rebranded, and I didn't realize it was for a shot.
It's like a week or so ago. Like, it's not very long. And so yeah, they've got, you know what, they're right next to my work. So it's really nice to just like, I walk outside of the office and it's a 2-minute walk to their front door. So I'm like leaving work and I'm like, yep, this is exactly where I'll go. This rules. Very good. Cool. Well, I'll let you guys open that. Keith, I'm really excited to see if you do blow this up all over your face, because that would be a first. And considering we've done 52 shows of this, I haven't caught anybody doing that in any background shots at all. So it'd be really interesting to see if that's what happens to you.
Well, we built this up into something.
Take it.
Here's hoping, but here's not hoping.
Of course.
If I disappear from the screen, you'll know why. Oh, it aged well.
Ooh, very good. Cool. Well, while you're pouring that, I thought it would be cool to talk about maybe some individual stories, because Keith, we've talked a little bit about yours, but we've had some new listeners join us and some new community members, which we love. But Bill, you are the ultimate, I'm just going to keep myself like out of the conversation. And I think maybe that's a good place to start is, Bill, maybe up until the point where you sort of cross paths with Keith, but what's your story, Bill?
I came with the bar when Troy bought it, which is the only reason he couldn't fire me. And Troy will confirm that every time.
Of course.
Okay. So really, kickoff was Jackie's bar. She was doing an undergrad, and in the late 1999, early 2000s, she was finishing up her undergrad at Waterloo. And she was taking her afternoon breaks over at this new cool place that was a cafe bar. And they mentioned they were looking for a bartender. And I was in between contracts and I was developing work over in Europe. And it was like, that'll work perfect, because like I can work the bar, come home, contact the people over in Europe, do the work I need to do for them, go to bed and get some sleep. And that's literally the backstory of how I started working at Kickoff. I was only going to be there for a short period of time, and found that I really enjoyed the work I was doing. And it's not much more complicated than that. Now, I'm trying to remember the first time I met Keith, and the only thing that keeps popping into my head is that the lyrics from that song, no long-haired creepy hippies need apply. Because every time I saw Keith, I was always giving him a hard time about the dreads and the hair. But this is now down this long. And I am almost ready to have Keith put my dreads in so we can look like father and son, because I would never say twins. Grandfather and son.
Of course. And Keith, maybe before we dive into your story, Bill, one thing though, I think maybe is important to maybe dive into a little bit is what led you to your, I guess, interest in beer, wine, scotch, like you have one of the best palates of anybody I've ever met. And I'm wondering like where that developed, how you became interested in that. And, you do classes for scotch, and I'd just be curious to you say your story. I basically, as far as I'm concerned and what you talk about yourself, your story starts in 1995, but I do believe there's something before that. So I'd love to know kind of where that interest.
You all have heard the story about beer with me, and my first beer being 15 years old and baling hay on a 32-degree day with my future brother-in-law. And 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we're not done yet, but it literally stepped off the wagon at the barn. They handed me this bottle of beer that was warm Canadian.
So you fell off the wagon before you fell off the wagon.
Yeah, I fell off the wagon. And I actually thought they'd pissed in the bottle. That was my total response. And there was a long time after that before I actually tried beer again. Because that was so ingrained in my head, that taste of warm Canadian. And I mean, not warm, 32 degrees warm. It was air temperature. And as for the scotch, I can't talk a lot about that because I actually did a Ignite conversation about it that used to be up online. And my fascination with scotch was because my English grandmother, my grandfather, who I do not remember because he passed away when I was 18 months old, there was a bottle of scotch that he hadn't opened because he was quite a drinker. And when I was 11, I stayed overnight at my grandma's because she was just across the field, but I always ran across the field. Stayed over at my grandma's, and we watched an old English movie where the guy smoked a stogie and had 2 fingers of scotch, and it was a great conversation. And at 11 o'clock at night, I'm lying there in bed, realizing that, well, I can't find a cigar, but I do know where there's a bottle of scotch. And my grandmother caught me. I had pushed her bureau over, her chest of drawers over to the closet, and had put a chair up on top of the bureau so I could reach the bottle of scotch in the back of the closet. And she caught me with the bottle of scotch in my hand. And that's the beginning of my fascination with scotch, because I later took up the art of appreciating scotch, and then learned as much as I could about it, because I enjoyed the taste. Wine was a thing that I developed about the time I was about 30, before I started actually appreciating wine.
That late, eh?
Yep, that late. Because my grandfather was an alcoholic, my dad was a teetotaler, so alcohol was not something that was in the family.
Right.
When I was growing up. So wine was something that I learned to appreciate later on in life, when I started having to, when I was in business and I started having to do the business meals.
Right.
And you couldn't always get a good scotch, but you could always find a half decent red wine. And so I learned to talk about wine. That's sort of everything into a tight little shell.
Of course. I mean, we only have so much time, but okay. And
But my grandmother's comment to me always stuck with me. I trusted you.
You even say that in a way that makes me I'm fearful.
I can't even say it the way she said it to me. I literally went from I was 6 foot tall when I was 11. I was about this big when she was done talking to me.
Keith, I was literally about to say, I'm pretty sure Bill said that exact phrase to me in that exact way. So I understand the Pavlovian response. So
right. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Bill, last thing, and then I want to dive into some Keith stuff, but I know how varied your kind of tasting palette is. Are you would you say you're definitively a Scotch guy? If it's what's your drink, you can have anything in the bar. Are you going to Scotch, or are you going to wine? Are you going to a cocktail?
Depends who I'm with.
Okay.
It depends who I'm with, and it depends what we're doing. The bottom line, if I was out with you, and if you turned to me and said, let's have a beer, I'd have a beer with you.
Sure.
If you were out with me and it was sort of later in the evening, and we were going to have a conversation, and you didn't care, I'd probably go and find a half decent scotch, and then you and I could sit there and enjoy the scotch together.
Okay.
But the flip side of the coin, if it's a bar that's got a decent wine selection, a good possibility that I'm as much as I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to scotch, I'm definitely a snob when it comes to wine now.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm more apt to buy wines to enjoy.
Cellar?
Yeah, well, there's a whole bunch of them down in my cellar right now.
Cool.
Waiting for when I can have friends over again.
Right. Yeah. Well.
So it would be beer if the person I was with really wanted to have a beer.
Sure.
And if not, then it would probably be a decent scotch if they had a decent scotch.
I appreciate that answer, that there's occasions for each sort of imbibement that you can have. Cool. Keith. Again.
Oh, wait, before you start, David, sorry, I wanted to ask Bill a couple of questions if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Feel free.
No,
Right.
No. This is your show, David.
You know what? But I'll cede the floor. I know who I am.
Well, I mean, we've all had, all of us who are on this have had so much amazing time with you, Bill. But what made you want to stay? Because you always say well, I came with the bar, but you could have left the bar and you never did. And bless Jackie for getting you into being there, and she's the conduit for all of this to happen. but what made you want to stay doing what you were doing?
The people. As simple as that. I actually enjoyed the people that I met, the conversations that I was able to have.
Very cool.
What are some of your favorite moments in like, in that history of,
There are
20
so,
like,
there are so many of them that come to mind in that one that it would be really hard to narrow one down. I
Sure.
think in the context of recent would be the day that Rich showed up. And he shows me this, he literally holds up his phone and he goes, see? And he's got this heavily pixelated picture that just looks like two spots of light, but it's heavily pixelated because it's so blowing up. And I'm like, cool, man. So you took a pixelated picture of light. And it was actually the first time they'd able to capture entangled electrons in the quantum. And him and I had quite the conversation afterwards, but I was just like, yeah, like, oh, that's so cool. So you pixelated a bunch of light, whoopee. and he was, the more he tried to tell me what it was, the cooler I got about it. But then when he realized I was just jagging him on, then we started having a serious conversation. It was actually kind of neat that they actually had the entanglement. So, this actually shows the quantum, and then him and I had quite an in-depth conversation. And that was the aspect of Kickoff that I really enjoyed, is those rare moments of intense conversation that you could have with people.
Bill, I had a great question.
People down before you actually get into them too. You got to make sure that they're worth their salt before you actually indulge in conversation, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, you always got ribbed about the hair every time I saw you.
The only human being who can call me a fucking hippie when I walk in the room. I'd get so mad if anyone else ever did.
Absolutely. That was the reason that I did that. It was like, I'm going to see what he'd do if I call him a hippie.
And I was like,
Bill, I had a great question come in from Shirag. He asked, what makes a good bar or bar experience? What are the different characteristics of something like that? And maybe like, what are your kind of like favorite bars, like outside of Kickoff, obviously.
Wow. I didn't get out much. I worked so much at the bar. I mean, it'd be like asking me, what's your favorite bar to go to celebrate St. Paddy's Day? And I'd be like, oh, I'm not working St. Paddy's Day. I'm going to be home.
Of course.
In my own house, not dealing with people.
Right.
So I guess when I think about the times that are memories for me, the conversations. I met the grandfather of St. Louis Blues, and I don't remember his name right now because it's been so many years. That was 20 years ago, but I met him in a blues club in St. Louis. One of the few times Jackie was actually at a conference in St. Louis, and I was on vacation, not the other way around. And I was out at the blues club, and there was only one seat. There was this guy who was like 74 years old. And I asked him if it was okay if I sat there with him in a beer, and we started talking. And I asked him, who, about the guy that was up on stage. And he says, oh, he's one of my students. I'm like, cool, you teach blues. And he starts talking to me about, no, he was in the first sort of recognizable St. Louis blues group, and started talking to me about traveling around the world. And 4.5 hours later, and I had no idea that was like 4.5 hours had gone by, but 4.5 hours later, it was like, wow, that was just intense. And then he went up and got on stage and played.
That's awesome.
Made it even better.
So that's very cool. Yeah, I like the idea of highlighting the conversations, especially like, and that, was, I think what we were trying to take on here was not only the depth, but like the naturally sort of like spontaneous conversations that we've experienced, from our days at Kickoff.
So Dale, I don't recall the gentleman's name, but he was the bass guitar player for the group. So I don't know if it was Handy or if it was one of the other ones.
Okay. Well, Keith, you okay if we dive into you?
Oh, if you have to.
Well, and again, we've chatted with you before and kind of like dove into your history. So like, maybe a little bit more Cole's notes for you, but maybe like also have your lead up to kind of your time meeting Bill and like what your experience in beer has been up until this point.
So meeting Bill the first time was actually after having like shown up at the bar multiple times in like early to mid afternoon, and Troy's finishing his pint at the end of the bar watching soccer and being completely disinterested in talking to me. I get it. No, I don't want to talk to you either. But then showing up and meeting this crusty old man who was just like, I know I get you on a deeper level than I think either of us realize, and I hope he felt the same, and I still hope he feels the same because he means
You
more
showed
to
up
me.
drunk from the grad house. So I actually thought you were one of the grads students
Yeah,
because
you're right.
I mean, I never saw any of them sober unless it was right after they actually defended their master's or their PhD.
Yep. Well, I'm in.
True, Bill, 'cause we usually went to the grad house first after defending.
But really, it was just like it was you and I, Bill, like kind of carving into each other and giving a little bit of space and just having fun and realizing that we were toying with each other and knowing there were so like you're such a, to use a cliche, an onion. There's so many layers to you that I can't wait to keep enjoying the next level of who you are and the next story that you have and the next experience, and helping you have another one and hopefully enjoying some of mine. So that's my history with Bill. Other than being the only other, you say it, because I'm the only other guy that's done what?
Oh yeah.
You are
Bill,
the only other person who kissed me at the bar and was alive at the end. Rob Crow, the last day that he was ever at kickoff, I was sitting down when he was going out the door, came over and pecked me on the cheek and ran out the door.
So I'm just trying to bring it up right now. So yeah, and I want to kind of use this as a catalyst to talk about how your relationship has developed. And maybe if you just could, as my screen shares, could you explain this for me maybe a little bit? What exactly is happening in this picture?
Well, I've
he had put date rape drugs in my drink beforehand.
Jesus.
That's what happened.
Bill.
Jesus
I
Christ.
think it might be vice versa.
I'll tell you what though, it's a very
It's
sensual.
a really bad form of tango, by the way. Yes.
So,
Which birthday
yeah.
party was this one?
That was yours. That was your birthday, and Heather and I brought you.
2019.
Yep,
2019. Yeah.
2019. Yep, and we brought you a rose to celebrate your birthday, and it turned into that. And now you're a long-haired hippie, and the world's falling apart.
Yeah. And I keep laughing every time I wash my hair and comb it out, because in January last year, I was contemplating shaving my head.
Oh, really?
Yep, totally.
That would have been good.
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys obviously are super tight. Like what, I mean, yes, we've talked about the sort of first interaction and like how that happened, but like, how did your relationship develop and like, how long have you guys really even known each other? Like what was that relationship developing like? And like, when did you guys know like, okay, we're super tight. This is how it's going to be.
Keith, take that one.
I will. Thank you. Okay, so coming from my side of the business, I'm a sales rep. I talk to people all the time. I have relationships with people. when I first met Bill, he was the most sincere, honest, interesting, stable human being I had met in the history of doing this, let alone my previous careers. It's just like, this is a human being that and this is why you're all a part of this too, is because he's a grounded human being that makes you feel better for knowing him. And I knew that right away when I walked in. And again, I was dealing with Troy, who was like, let me finish my pint and get somebody to pick me up to go home. And then and I was like, I thought, okay, cool. But I was like, wow, I never realized this. Like, he's my brother. He's my fucking brother. That's the only way I can put it otherwise, is I just knew it from the start. Grounded human being, amazing human being. You all wouldn't be here if that weren't the case. Sorry. That's the truth. Bill?
You do realize that you guys are bringing out the Baptist grandmother side of me when you do that, eh? Pride comes before a fall. You know, as soon as you start thinking that you're doing something right, God will correct you. So when you do that to me, Keith, I'm like gonna shut the screen off. I'm gonna go away. I'm gonna have a scotch, maybe come back. I might not come back. But thank you for all those kind words. The only time I've probably been more embarrassed was the first time I allowed everybody at the bar on my birthday to roast me.
Ooh.
And not a single person did a roast. Now, Derek's birthday, they did that and they all roasted him. And I really appreciated that. But I'm standing there and listening to these people going, did you guys miss something in the term roast? Like, you were supposed to make fun of me, not tell me how much you love me. You know? So.
And I think maybe what that speaks to, Bill, is I think there's a lot of different, like, you know, we've, like, all of us here have had a very complex, like, but, you know, long and developed relationship with you. And I think if there's only, you know, one emotion that all of us feel for you more than respect, you know, admiration, and all those things, is the real and true fear that you could end our lives with your thumb, probably, and nobody would ever find the body. So, you know, that's probably speaks to those two things.
Man, that's way too much work. That's way too much work now. I just find somebody else to do it for me.
Yeah, it's true. That concerns me too, because I know you have those connects. So,
oh man, I can see this is
it's devolving. So I'm going to bring us back on track. So before I dive into, I have some cool stuff about sort of what's next for Beers with Bill and sort of all of that. But Keith, I know you had mentioned, and I'm usually like the behind the scenes guy, but you wanted to bring some things in. I will allow this. So what do you got?
I wanted to ask you about you, because you've been pivotal in making all of this happen. So I wanted to hear multiple questions, but the first one, what brought you into wanting to be a part of making this happen?
So I've told this story a couple of times, but it really all starts with my journey to Kickoff, which was I completed a master's, frequented the grad house, but never experienced Kickoff. And as my buddies who went on to their PhD once said, I sold out heavily and immediately went into the private sector rather than continuing on my grad school. But they then told me that they found a bar. It's in the plaza. It's got really awesome beer selection. The bartender's a little bit wacky, but like, you'll love it. So it started getting to the point where I had a very flexible work schedule where I could kind of come and go as I pleased. And yeah, I was just like, it got to the point where instead of checking with them if they were there, I would just assume they were. And I, without even realized it, gotten to know some of the other regulars that were there and gotten to chat with Bill a few times. And I hadn't realized that I was becoming a regular until Bill had added me very recently onto Facebook. Didn't comment or anything, but I had, posted some pictures or whatever. And I walked into the bar, realized I wasn't going there expecting either of my friends, just was going to kick off to enjoy a pint. Bill was sitting there with, I think Graham was there. I want to say Matt Cooper was there and a couple others, but I can't remember them. And Bill's sitting there and just so loud, just goes, Dave, you're not going to fucking date anybody if you keep posting hipster pictures like that. And I just, in that moment, got very introspective and realized I was a regular at the time. And it was way too late to turn back. So I was just stuck. You know, and to fast forward a little bit, eventually Bill had mentioned that he was thinking about doing some career coaching lessons and like kind of developing that part of his career. So him and I have been career coaches since I want to say early 2019, Bill, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. And when the pandemic started, him and I were talking about a few different ideas, and he went, I really want to try to engage with the community. I don't know what this looks like, but do you think you could help me like kind of throw together like a live like Zoom session for some people, and we'll record it? And I went, yeah, sure. One or two of them, sure, why not? And it kind of was like becoming a regular at Kickoff, where before I knew it, it was like, oh my God, we've done 52 of these and I've been involved with all of them and I didn't even realize it. And I made a website, and it's just been like this kind of whirlwind journey. And it's been really cool because I would have expected that we would have fallen off at like 10 and been like, this was really fun. I'm glad everybody got something out of it. But now here we are.
How do you feel about looking on the retrospect of your work with this? Like you said, 52 episodes, and you were expected to do maybe a dozen.
Yeah, well, I mean, funny enough, and like Bill will attest to this, like there was a lot of work, and it actually all kind of lined up nicely timing wise, where there was a lot of work at the start to develop a website and like kind of think about what it would look like and figure out, you know, how to upload everything, how to help them on the technical side. And then at this point, really, I'll do my best to like get all of the new posts up about what's coming up there on the front page. But then really, it's just a matter of uploading everything to YouTube. And I'll tell you what, like Bill talks like it's like an equal partnership. Bill like spends a ton of time on this, and like it really is a labor of love for him. I am always happy to support it. But if people are like, who's the brains behind the operation? I am just like basically the IT crowd, and that's okay. But Bill, I think really wholeheartedly recognized that this is a way to engage the community and to continue on this sort of conversational and discussional engagement with everyone that had come into Kickoff. And now we've expanded even beyond that, and that's been great. So it's been really fun to kind of work on the side. I like it a lot.
I think that's amazing, because that's why like it's time to shine a light on, like, there are equal aspects to, like you said, like Bill lives and breathes it and is the face of it and is, fake, but you deserve respect for everything that you're putting into it as well. And I would be on it every week if I could, but I can't, unfortunately. But I know that there are other people that are, religiously on it, and it's a part of their weekly ritual. And few people ever have the beauty of being that, Bill.
I was actually just thinking about David sermon here, because I remember his reaction after the first show. I don't know if you I don't know if you remember.
I honestly don't.
So we talked the next day, and I was so proud.
Oh yeah, that's right. Well, because you're such a great conversationalist, but and it's not really a camera, but like sometimes you have no idea where you're going to get out of the experience when you bring someone into like a very interview heavy like podcast essential format. Like, how are they going to do? And like from the get-go, really, like Bill had such a strong basis for asking all the right questions, keeping the conversation going, engaging the audience. Although telling him at one point, I think in show 2 and 3, that there was a chat that he should check on from time to time was like a massive revelation. But like it's been this cool process to watch you develop yourself as a host, but you already had such a strong baseline, I think, from the get-go. But yeah, I was like, Bill, well done, sir. Like right from the start. It was really impressive.
Well, I did set out to screw up as many times as I could in the
course.
first 20 shows.
Yep.
And still managed to save a few for later on. Okay.
What's life without surprises, huh?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's one of the things I love about this, though, is, I mean, we've had, like informative sessions with this and fun sessions and tastings. And this one was meant to be a little bit unscripted in the sense of
Yeah.
let's celebrate what it is, because it's been a year of doing this. So,
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody else that's watching is opening up one of their cellar beers, or, embracing what Cam did with like teaching us about glassware and things like that were like super cool, informative things. And not, we've learned a lot about unique breweries and cideries and coffee places that are super cool, but also, some of the technical aspects of what makes this enjoyable for us. And this is what brought us all together. It's a social aspect, but they come into ties with each other, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fun to think about. It felt like at the start of the pandemic, everyone at breweries was like, oh yeah, we'll still do like a get together, even though you can't come in, and they would do Zoom chats or whatever. But they obviously weren't going to be able to recreate the atmosphere of a bar. And I think what we did is we recognized that right from the get-go, that it had to be interview based to not be a poor mirror of what the experience inside the bar was like. So I think we achieved that actually quite well. And that's worked out really nicely, I find, which I think leads nicely into this kind of next batch of things that we're going to talk about on this show. And like he said, this is much more very conversational, much more about kind of what's next, our journey to now. And I thought it'd be good at this point to kind of highlight, I ran out of time to get one of the stats, which I'm really bummed about, but I'll bring it for next week. But in the 52 shows that we've had, and again, haven't missed a week, which is kind of insane to me. Bill, what a achievement to just go straight for 52 weeks. But we've had 40 guests total on the entirety, unique guests, which means, Keith's been on a couple of times, Grant Kobayashi's been on a couple of times. Like, we've had a couple of repeats, but 40 unique guests have been brought to the table.
41 yes, because my son was on the last time when we got.
Oh, that's right. I didn't count your son. That's right.
That's right. We didn't count Chris, and we should have.
That's very good. But then also, and those were represented from, and I think this is actually really cool, is because we have a tight network, but Kickoff had some very strong breweries that they were attached to, but we managed to still discuss with 23 individual breweries their beers and their experiences all across Ontario, which is amazing. And as well as 2 cideries, which was not something I think we had really expected right from the get-go, and that's amazing. As well as a coffee place, because Monograms rules, which is awesome. So, those are some really cool stats. I'd love to find, I'm going to bring them for next week, but how many individual beers have been brought in for tastings. I am going to find that stat, but I would have had to go through every individual post, and it was taking a lot of time, and I had a bit of a weird weekend. So I will bring that for next time. So I think maybe where we can start to take this with the next part of the show is this next part, I think, is going to be a little bit more of a, let's call it town hall roundtable style, where I'd really encourage people to kind of jump in with kind of questions in the chat. I'll be really taking a dive into them about what's next for Beers with Bill. Like, where do we kind of see this going? Like, not only for the rest of these shows, but also what does post-pandemic Beers with Bill kind of look like? And I think I'll kind of begin. Just Bill, any thoughts just to start off?
You expect me to have a thought right now after all of
I
those
think you have
accolades?
some thoughts.
Oh man.
Why start now?
So
Right?
so let's talk about post-pandemic then.
Sure.
Ultimately, the goal and I'll probably do the first one with Marvin at Wellington Brewery, is to actually do the shows live from the brewery. And I mentioned that to Marvin after I talked to him post show the last time he was on, and he was like, "Oh, that's cool. Yeah, we need to do that." So, so ultimately down the road, the hope is to eventually to actually be doing Beers with Bill live from the brewery. Maybe not every week, but whenever I can, it makes sense to do that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that we'll start to, I mean, as we start to hopefully eventually, you know, recapture the vibe of the pre-pandemic, I think bring back that, you know, the chatter of the background of the bar and like still getting to taste, but like actually experience those breweries in person. Yeah, I think that'll be a really interesting part of it. Bill, one thing you and I have talked about pretty frequently is exploring using, especially but not limited to, but breweries in like say smaller towns or smaller cities as a way to explore their unique gems, the like what you could find. Like the great example I kind of thought of from the start would be talking about Gateway City and what all their beers as they represent the travelry there and what the different stuff is there, right? Like I think there's a lot of opportunity to explore like smaller towns and be like, why is it's not Railway, but there was a new brewery I found in St. Mary's that like is in an old train yard, and I'm like, I wonder why that show's here. That's really interesting. Like, and I think there's some really interesting opportunities to explore culture and city uniqueness through the lens of a brewery and use that as kind of a launching point into what else could you find here. And I think that's like a really interesting aspect of what's next as well.
Keith, you want to jump in here?
Yeah.
Okay, I wholeheartedly agree. This is how you learn about local culture, which is what this show has done for 52 episodes. This is how you learn about what's going on in the world around you that you might not otherwise experience, i.e. Brent, who's going to be on next week, right? Heartwood Cidery. Right in your backyard. You could visit it in other circumstances, not necessarily these ones. But how much fun would it be to be doing that with the people in their element instead of necessarily with a kitchen background?
Yeah.
Having them where they are and them saying, by the way, since you're here, why don't you run down the street to this great, restaurant and whatever. And Bill, you can follow up with this in the sense of the way it's kind of a catch me if you can. I'll leave it at that.
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, part of the idea was for us as a group to go to a brewery and shoot a promo for the brewery when we're going to have them live on the show. And then to go around to everything that's local, that's unique. You take the Woodstock, we have our own coffee roaster, Early Bird Coffee here in town. We actually have a gentleman who's been at the bar for a Scotch tasting with chocolate, who conches his own chocolate. He's the coffee top and a chocolate shop. And there's a couple of other unique little venues around Woodstock. The kind of idea of going there, shooting a 90-second clip, which takes a lot more than 90 seconds to shoot, but literally to feature them as part of a backdrop to here's the brewery we're going to feature. If you ever decide to go to the brewery, here are the elements around the brewery. And I kind of called it a scavenger hunt, which of course I can't legally do. I'd have to look it up. I've forgotten what the Danish name for it is, but thought about doing that with the idea that here's where we've been. Why don't you guys check it out and create a game out of it?
Yeah. And I think like writing about or capturing in videography, but like capturing like that. Like I love nothing more than I tried to do it a bunch during the pandemic where I did it in Goderich, or not Goderich, but like kind of that area as well as Collingwood, where I'd go up and check out a couple of breweries there and go, where'd you recommend I go grab food? I want to go to a local place. I'm not just going to go to the Harvey's. Like, what do you suggest? Like, And that's, I think, the type of experience we want to kind of set people up for, where it's like, yeah, like this is where you can check out cool things. And yeah, Goderich, Collingwood, North Bay, like these little bit smaller communities that might not be as local to you in KW or Toronto, check out those kind of smaller joints. And that's where I try to do beer field trips pretty often, because I think it's just fun to go check out what's going on around there. And that's, I think, some of the inspiration behind this idea. Chirag brings up a really interesting question, and I think we can totally dive back into this, but about
that I just wanted to say too, though, that like understand that like your breweries know where the good restaurants are, and that's
Yes.
not just because they're, you know, hey, you know, they're buying from me, but it's also because, to be completely fair, I deliver to the restaurant and I know what their kitchen looks like. I know what kind of food they serve. I know what the kind of people are like. So if you're going to get a recommendation from a brewery as to where you should eat, you might want to take it sincerely. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I've been to places where I thought they were amazing, and then I walk in and see another side of them. And I've gone to places where I thought I would never eat, and then go, "Wow, this is amazing!" Like,
Yeah.
what the heck? So, you know, this would be another way to showcase that. So.
100%.
I'm
Sorry,
picturing this Iron Horse Trail bike pub crawl going, oh, cool. I could guest bartend at each one of those places so I could abuse all of you.
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
I mean, I have over a year's worth of abuse that's been building up inside me. What are you going to do now?
And Chirag brings up a really interesting question about maybe Chirag, I'll actually just get you to ask it, but you kind of brought up something about like memberships and like kind of what did you kind of thought behind that? Because I think we have a few thoughts on that and would love to explore it with you.
Yeah, I mean, it was more of like a membership or a beer delivery or a beer club kind of thing where, I don't know, post-pandemic, in a world where we don't do these every week, how do you maintain the connections that we've built here?
Yeah. Maybe the one thing I'll kind of start off is one thing I think this has been 100% a labor of love for us. And I think one thing we've thought about as a way to kind of allow us to keep going on it would be either whether it's GoFundMe or like a Patreon or something where there's like kind of like what you mentioned, whether that's like a beer a month or like a couple beers a month or exclusive shows, or when we do live shows, like tickets, like stuff like that. Like we have kind of been pondering what that looks like in both the current and post-pandemic worlds. Bill, what do you think? Like, what are your thoughts around something like that?
You've said all my thoughts on that.
Okay, fair enough.
It's like, nope, done.
We just talk too much. I mean, you and I do have another standing meeting tomorrow, so I guess we're just going to review all this again. So here we are. Yeah, I think there's something we said for like, we've loved doing this, but we also want to see if like there's ways that like with, you know, some donations, funding, whatever you want to call it, but like a way to like kind of make it even cooler, like whether it's like funding Bill bartending a place or like, yeah, pub crawls, like there's all sorts of cool things that we can do. And we're like kind of thinking about all of them. And I think we'll be talking a lot about them as we kind of enter year 2. So yeah, I think there's gonna be some interesting kind of things to come out of this.
I think part of it too is like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be awesome to hear, you know, some of, like, I know you guys are like posting in the chat, but actually hear you say what this has meant to you over the past year and what you would like to see from it over the next year. And I mean, there was a clear definition. I remember it when it was like everybody could talk and we fixed that quickly, or you guys fixed that quickly. But it would be awesome to have an open forum where you actually discuss it and say your piece instead of posting it. So
actually, yeah, Katie, maybe you can kind of start it off. I kind of saw your comment. I think that actually is a really interesting one. Like, do you want to maybe expand on that?
So David, before we go on to this, to save you a lot of editing, I'm going to close the show off. Okay.
That seems
and then
fair.
we'll just go to open. So I have a few things just to remind everybody. One, Third Moon Brewing's anniversary is this week. Check out their website. They are releasing a whole bunch of cool beers.
Ooh.
Graham from Block 3, and I forgot the name of the brewery in London, are doing a live show on Friday evening. Next week, as Keith alluded to,
Stormstayed. It's the one. Stormstayed from London.
Stormstayed, yes, that's it. Thank you. Stormstayed from London. They're doing a show on Friday night. Get out there and support them if you can. Watch the show. Should be interesting. You've got till sometime tomorrow to order the beer in the region to get home delivery if you want. Next week, Brent Klassen has agreed to do show number 1 of year 2. We're looking forward to that. I will be firing off an email early tomorrow morning. I've got the list of ciders that he is going to talk about. We're looking forward to that. And Richard Price from Escarpment Labs is joining us at the end of the month. Thank you all for show number 52 and for all the wonderful, kind words you've said.
Yes. Thanks for the last year, everyone. It's been great.